I was so proud, and I remember thinking to myself, "My gosh, how beautifully shot, and how amazing to see this." You know, I had the good fortune of conducting the show, so in a way, I got to see the show up close all the time. And here was a beautiful, beautifully edited version of the film where we get a chance to get some really unique vantage points for the show. And sometimes we're really up close with the actors, sometimes we're really far back. But it's really thrilling to see a theatrical medium all of a sudden transported into a cinematic medium. Not a lot of shows get that opportunity, so I remember being thrilled. You know, it's hard for me to just pinpoint one particular thing, but I have great memories of being at the White House when we were asked to perform there in 2016, just before Obama had left office. And you know, I have a memory of seeing Chris Jackson sing one last time, singing about teach him how to say goodbye in front of our president, who was about to say goodbye himself, not long after. That was just very. Oh, was that 2015? I don't. Whatever
That
that
was,
was. Anyway,
that was
but
it. It was amazing.
that was just a very special thing to be invited into that room. And again, that very room where we performed the song 6 years prior. And, you know, not every show gets that opportunity to be there. And that's something that I will carry with me for a very long time.
When I was a kid, there wasn't a ton of mentorship in terms of I dreamed of being on Broadway. It was very far away. I grew up in Ohio. And so I had to reach for what those images might be and what that might feel like to be a Broadway performer. Our screening, I think, does a really great job at taking a theatrical idea and just putting it into people's laps. And so people all over the world and all over our country, young people will look at it and they will maybe get a better view of theater than they've ever had. And I think that's really going to be a really inspiring inspiration to people. And so in watching the film, that's what struck me is that this is probably one of the best representations of a live show that I've ever seen. And I'm so proud to be part of what's going to offer that to people. You know, it's so interesting. My father, when he saw the show, he always says, I couldn't hear, I couldn't hear, I couldn't hear. And I was nervous that at Hamilton he was going to say I missed too many lyrics. And you know what? He didn't, because he saw the show. He followed the story. And when you see the story, you're moved by it, but then you realize I have to see it again because there's so many nuances I never could have grasped on the first pass, like the power of the orchestrations, the intricacy of dance steps, the double and triple entendres in the lyric, that I think people are going to see the show and it's going to whet their appetite to dig deeper. And I think that's a really great thing that theater can do for you. I'm gonna skip to a cabinet meeting because you know Alex and Tommy and Lynn and I were very close friends, and we had our heads blown off when we received the Kennedy Center honor. And
Um,
one of the funniest things ever was at the pre-show of the show, we were behind the house curtain with Cher and Reba, and the national anthem played, and we weren't supposed to stand up. But then Cher, of course, they had to stand up, and then Cher couldn't get back on her seat with her dress because her dress was so big. And we looked at each other and we were like, who are we? And how did we get to this amazing place? So Hamilton has brought us like such funny, great memories like that that we could have never imagined we could have.
We were well into it before I got a sense of the world's reaction to it. Um, I've known him long enough to not ever doubt anything that he's trying. I may think that I may not agree with the concept or the idea, but at the time that the time that he brought this up was about I guess 10 years ago. At this point, maybe a little bit longer. Um, it took him a long, it takes a long time to build these things, right? To write these types of projects and get them to a place where anybody knows anything. By the time we got into that place, it was just what. Of course, it's going to be fun to do. these are the most insane people that I've ever been around, talent-wise, smart and insightful, and just a force. And so this was going to be one of those projects, to answer your question, whether the world loved it or not, it was going to be the best thing that I was ever a part of. That the world did respond to it is just icing on the cake, and why we're here now. But there's no magic, there's no crystal ball. Like, Broadway is a commercial venture. At the end of the day, if people are buying tickets, you get to stay open. And fortunately for us, they bought the tickets, and we just got to keep coming back, making the story. Singing to President Obama in the East Room of the White House.
I think it's you know, there's no live Hamilton performing at the moment, so like it's a good way to keep people engaged in the show, and I think it's giving a whole new kind of access to a whole bunch of people who couldn't have access before, by virtue of the fact that there's only so many seats in the theater, and also because they are prohibitively expensive for the bulk of people in the world. So this is a cool thing to do. I think the thread of youth-led revolution is one that's particularly important these days, as we see our young people sort of in the streets advocating for accountability and for change from our systems of power. And I hope this can be used as a piece of inspiration for them. We've seen lyrics showing up on signs at protests, and we've seen, you know, there is really the movement for popularizing this show was pretty youth-led, and it is gratifying to me that those same people are still using it, that same generation is still using it out in the streets as they enact their own revolutionary practices and find their voice in that space. So hopefully this is useful to them as well. The time when I first met the love of my life, who was it wasn't on stage, but it was we were between shows, still at the Public.
Honestly, I could just like name one, but one of my favorite memories is right before Schuyler Sisters, me, Pippa, and RENÉE dancing, lifting each other up, rapping, looking, you know, making sure that we're all good to go. And just, we also did, we gave each other a big hug for a while, and just hyped each other up right before we went out, you know. And we had a lot of pressure because it was a lot of men on stage, and this was like introducing the women. So, you know, we had to come in strong, and, you know, we lifted each other up every time we went out, and it became a ritual. So, you know, that was one of my favorite moments.
I wouldn't say much. I mean, I kind of said everything that I had to say in 2016 when we filmed it. I'm way more interested. It feels a lot like it did before we opened off Broadway. I'm much more interested at this point in the other half of the conversation. I want to hear from them. I want to hear what people think about it. I want to hear what it means to them today. Does it have a different resonance? You know, I feel like I said everything that I had to say.
I spent 6 years writing Hamilton. I started writing it in 2008. We opened in 2015, so it's really 7 years. And you know, for me, the story is about someone who came here from somewhere else. He's the immigrant among the founders, had a very short but very eventful life. But I think the larger theme of the show is really legacy. What do we do with our time? on this planet? What do we do with our time here on Earth? And how are we remembered? That's the question that haunts both Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton through the story of this show. And I think it's what continues to resonate with audiences after the show's over. That moment in September when we let the world in on the entire story of the show, because the entire story is in that cast album. And I'm looking forward to the echo of that when we give the world this movie that is a document of that time.
I think it's the right time to release Hamilton because after George Floyd was murdered, a lot of people felt the need to have a conversation finally about systematic racism in this country. And I think in order for that to happen, it requires people to be relentless with their voice, to constantly speak out every chance they get, and to demand to see an America that they believe is just and true. And I think that's exactly what Alexander Hamilton was doing. That's exactly what he wanted to do. That's why he decided to speak out and become a lawyer, and why he wrote the Federalist Papers. He was determined to say, look, if this country is going to be created, it should be created a certain way that I believe is equal and fair. And the people now are just saying, well, the country was created, but we think it should change in a way that's equal and fair. And I think if you take the time, you'll see the parallels between the movement that's happening and the movement that happened then. The Zitz probe. For all who don't know, a Zitz probe in theater is when the cast sits down and for the first time sings with the entire orchestra. So normally when we rehearse, we have a piano, and then before we go stage, the cast for the first time in the orchestra, everyone meets and everyone just sits down and sings. There's no blocking and anything. And it just hit me when you asked that. It was just beautiful to hear it all together, meaning the orchestration is such a character in onto itself, to hear the two finally come together. And it was out of this world. And I also remember listening to Pip singing and saying, somehow she's singing over an entire orchestra. I don't know how you were doing it, but you did it, and it was remarkable.
Well, I did see the film, and I was so emotionally taken aback. I just was so proud of all the work that we had done. I've seen the show from two different sides. One from the house. I went and saw the show back in December. And then I also have seen the show like from being on stage and mostly seeing other people's performances from behind and watching their heads. And the thing about this film is that at every single angle, every single shot, every single moment, you have the best seat in the house. And sometimes the best seat in the house, you are like on stage with us. So in a way, it almost felt, watching it almost felt like I was having a dream about being back in the show. I felt that much inside of it in certain moments. And even more so like outside of it in a very sort of like ethereal way, because we have this amazing camera that's like from up above. So there's shots that you wouldn't be able to see as an actor or as an audience member. It could only be seen in this way. And Thomas Kail, our director, captured that beautifully. There's too many to pick one, but I will say on a general level, backstage was its own journey every single night. There was what was happening on stage, and then there was like the behind the scenes, the friendships that blossomed, the
relationships.
Like there was just so much, and it was so full, and it was such a beautiful group of people to share the Hamilton experience with, that when I'm asked that question, like my mind immediately goes back to just like giggling nonstop backstage with RENÉE and Jasmine in our dressing room. You know, those are the moments that were definitely like, it was like a little secret that we had. Like, yes, we're sharing this thing with you and it's for all the world to see, but we did get a little part of it that was like just our own, and it was really special.
stunning, breathtaking, magical. If those words actually really still mean something, that's what this is. It is to me a miracle because it is everything that is so beautiful and so possible about a theatrical expression, and everything that is so beautiful and uniquely possible about a cinematic expression fused together. If you think you never saw it, you're okay, because you will get to see it in this movie. If you think you did see it, you haven't seen it yet. This film is different. After Satisfied, every show. I absolutely loved the moments where I put some of the stress and anxiety about, you know, kind of being a good enough steward over this amazing opportunity down, just to enjoy this cast and to enjoy all of the crazy things that were happening to us all of the time. Those were my favorite moments, when I stopped taking myself so seriously and just was silly and laughed and you know, and received the gift, which was this family.
My hope is that the movie experience takes all the things we love about cinema and everything that we love about being in the theater and finds a synthesis there. So what we tried to do was make a film that was always acknowledging the power of theater, that we were in a theater. So you hear the audience, you feel the audience, you see the theatrical lighting, and we don't shy away from that. I think it's really important to own where you are. And we wanted to memorialize this cast. We wanted to take this group of performers that we knew eventually would not all be together and capture this thing and hold on to it so we could share it. And I think that's, you know, what we tried to do was honor their work, just as we were all trying to honor Lin's text. I do know that getting a chance to check in with the original company after they were able to see their work was enormously meaningful for me. You know, I made this film to honor what they did. And once we had the opportunity to move this up, and we knew we were going to be able to share it with the world, which was the other thing we've been so desperate to do. How do we give more people access to it? I wanted that company to see it, and now I want the rest of the world to see it. So I hope that speaks to the, you know, to how that feels in the twilight of this day, but also how much I'm anticipating July 3rd and July 4th and all the days beyond that for the movie.